especially during the COVID, keep up with these demands. However, many companies are still struggling to keep pace with the onslaught of the digital trends that are disrupting the traditional supply chain management, slashing response times, and raising customers' expectations. We have brought together a power packed panel of leaders from the supply chain industries, curating innovative approaches, trends, and technologies that are shaping the future of the supply chain, making it intelligent and better. I would now like to invite Dr. Anil Chinnabandar, Senior Vice President for Retail Planning and Supply Chain at Landmark Group India, to chair a panel discussion on the supply chain digitization imperative and emerging use cases. The panelists are Mr. Swaminathan, Chief Supply Chain Officer at Aditya Birla Fashion and Retail, Mr. Balakrishnan, Senior Engineering Director, Supply Chain at Lowe's, Mr. Atul Barve, General Manager Supply Chain at Signify, and Mr. Som Shubra, Senior Manager at Kmart. Over to you, Dr. Anil.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thanks for the kind introduction. And then welcome everyone and very good afternoon. I'm very, very excited to be bringing this panel of experts, in fact, in the topic of the day. And post-pandemic, I think, the entire business actually is now gearing up for creating historical numbers or historical business recovery and so on. So it's been a great, actually, mahol or environment all around us, actually. Having said that, when there is a huge uplift in the overall business sentiment or environment, there are also equal number of challenges actually for the people in the back end. I would say all my counterparts are actually who are handling the entire planning, supply chain, parts of applications and all that. And then it would be a great opportunity for us to kind of share these case studies or use cases actually with the larger audience, and also kind of take some tips or even learn from actually each other to probably offer a far better solutions, in fact, into the entire business world around us. Well, let's actually start the topic of the day. Businesses, including retail business, has gone through several levels of change, transformation, evolution, whatever that we want to describe, right? I'm talking about over the last couple of decades. If you go back about 20 years ago, most manufacturing places used to have production planning and control, or a PPC department, which happened to be the brain of the organization. PPC is a department where most of the plans were done, the capacity planning was done, scheduling was done, and then the entire materials management was done, the bill of materials and so on and so forth. So we used to actually do a very, very detailed, not only the planning for the materials, but also on the processes and the process controls, quality controls, and what happens if the quality control fails and so on. So we used to have a very, very elaborate department called PPC, and then we became a supply chain planning, which was also kind of including parts of operations excellence and all that. Today, most organizations actually call it as integrated business planning, including operations excellence, plus the supply chain planning and then execution, including the demand management and all that. So we call it as actually integrated business planning, which is the focus of the topic today. Not many leaders talk about forecasting anymore. Have you observed that? Because forecasting actually has gone through the roller shutters, in fact, because nobody wants to now predict the unpredictable, so to say, and then kind of got caught in the whole thing. So people talk about managing demand these days. People talk about how do we get better at demand sensing rather than managing demand, because managing demand has almost come with a plan A, plan B, plan C, and so on. But how do you sense the demand? This has actually been the trend for the last so many years. And guess what? The COVID-19 has only increased or accelerated the pace of actually demand sensing. Why? Because we are charting a territory which was uncharted before. We are looking into the areas which had never been kind of charted before or never even contemplated before. Therefore, this new post-pandemic or a new normal, whatever we are trying to call as, this new demand sensing has become very, very key and then critical to the entire success of the business itself. Now, if you really look at some of the post-pandemic, actually, what has happened, in fact, what are some of the key problems that's facing the industry? Let's look at that, particularly for supply chain planners in the first bit, and then the second part we'll look at some of the supply chain intelligence side of things. Now, what is faced with the was faced actually by some of the supply chain managers. How do you manage the inventory? How do you manage supply and demand? How do you manage your manufacturing and supplies? How do you manage actually your capacities and distribution, warehouse operations, and so on? So there are a whole lot of questions, right? So we have a very, very eminent panel, as Lindsay actually, alluded us. Let's actually look at, in fact, this entire problem into two parts. As I said, one on the planning side, the other one on the supply chain intelligence side of things. So we will look at the first one as challenges around integrated business planning. And the first question is like this: given the once a lifetime pandemic hit business scenarios, wherein entire ecosystem seem to have collapsed around us, what has been your challenges? What have been your challenges with the business planning, especially around managing inventory, resources, cash flow crises, and what planning skills have helped you to navigate this situation? If I can get my co-panelist Swami to start with. Swami, if you can give us some idea on that.
Thank you, Anil. Thank you for the opportunity in ASCOM. And in fact, it is indeed once in a lifetime experience for all of us. In fact, the COVID situation has taught us a lot of things in terms of supply chain management, which probably would have never learned it. And this I see is the biggest opportunity for all professionals like us who have been going through this. This has been unprecedented in the sense, we all know this side, I think you would have heard it multiple times, though I would just to set the context, the both supply and demand side changed, if I can say, violently. The demand side changed, especially in apparel retail. I think this was true in all retail formats. Apparel retail, again, the change in demand in terms of categories has been during the pandemic and post the pandemic has been quite dramatic. For example, during the pandemic, a lot of work from home merchandise rate of sale dramatically picked up. And post pandemic, that is a big learning. This is something. For me, it has been a great learning on the resilience of the Indian market. How it bounced back was in fact a big surprise for many business managers. And the bounce back in the categories, especially again, which we didn't expect bounce back, was also a big challenge. So to cut the long story short, this has been a case of unpredictability all along, right from the moment it started. What happened? What did we do? As Anil was telling, what did we do? One is the planning horizons changed. We used to do a 6-monthly plan, 6-month forecast, forward forecast plan. We cut it down to 3. We used to do it every month. We started doing it every week sometimes during the week, because there's no point in the numbers of the previous week were no longer valid. There's changed. Perceptions have changed. A lot of things changed in terms of it, because of which we had to change the planning horizon. The second thing what we did is, I would say, as Anil was telling, we ignored forecasts of the past, forecasting tools of the past, but we had to find new signals. And these new signals, there are two aspects to it. One was the importance of teams came together in reality now, because we had to not get data. We had to speak to multiple functions, sales teams, supply teams, vendors, to get a real picture of what is likely to happen. So the working together, we learned people matter. At this point of time, one of the biggest learning personally for me is people matter a lot more than as much as the tools. I wouldn't say a lot more. The tools are quite important. People really did matter, and that was one of the biggest learnings, which has all along been there. But in this crisis, it came to the fore. In terms of the forecast, yes, we need to find new ways of understanding what is likely to happen by speaking to the customer, and then sensing data. There are a lot of external data points available. So we had to use all these to be able to sense what's going to happen. What did we do as an organization? Anil was asking, what did we do as an organization? One is, or I wouldn't say as an organization, this is as an industry. I don't know. I'm not specifically talking about organization is one is that most of the industry realized the high number of SKUs, which we have all been proliferating over years, is one of the banes of this business. And so we said, reduce the proliferation in SKUs. Consumers were not looking for as many SKUs as we were trying to give them. And this was actually complicating supply chain, complicating execution. And in a sense, we were not able to get customers what they wanted. So one is we rationalized SKUs. Two is we slow down new product introductions. The rapid sense of rapid introductions of new products was not required in the market. We were very clear what customers wanted. Provide them what they want. Don't go by your set format of exiting new old collection, producing new collections. So we found a lot of what we normally do is actually relevant for a much longer time, and that was proven. In my experience, it was proven for most of the business leaders. I think we don't need to unnecessarily change introduce new collections and give, instead of that, bring consumers what they want at that point of time. And then I would say this I again talked about in terms of rate of sale. Rate of sale changed dramatically down and dramatically up. This is again post-pandemic, the kind of recovery in categories which we never expected, and which was a learning in the first wave, and the second wave we were far better prepared, I guess, as all leaders were. Correct. Sometimes we are better, more knowledgeable in hindsight, and so we were the experience of the first wave really did help us to be able to prepare for the second wave, and probably what we need to do for probably a third wave, which will come, as we all say. But I think businesses are learning to do much better than what we initially went through. And another most important aspect has been the transparency which was required across functions, not across only functions within the company, across the chain, including customers to vendors. So this was extremely critical for a working capital intensive business like fashion. It's a working capital intensive business. So for customers, for us, for vendors, it's a very heavy intensity of working capital. That has been one of the challenges of the industry as well, because of the long lead time which we work with. So everybody needs to carry a certain level of inventory. So we build transparency across the chain. We speak to customers more often. We speak to our vendors more often. We share with our vendors what is the projected demand. Everybody is having some these things. The first thing they wanted was payment on time, and that was the most important thing in the cash crisis like that. So the whole organization rallied around the vendor network to be able to execute that. Second is to get visibility to the organization as well as the vendor chain to be able to what is expected in the next 3 months. And again, this changed every week. So everybody had to be patient with us. Everybody had to be patient and humble enough to say that what we said last week is wrong, probably wrong. Again, we cannot say it's wrong, probably wrong. So the sensitize the whole chain to be able to respond to these quick changes. And this has been one of the biggest learning for me professionally.
Thank you, Swami. I think it's wonderful, actually, right? I mean, just to recollect, I mean, one of the biggest, the takeaways that I picked up was the large number of SKUs, right? In one of my previous panels, actually, last week, when I mentioned that we have a more than lakh unique SKUs actually in our inventory at any given point of time. Literally, the other panelists, who are from FMCG companies, they kind of, fell off the chair. Because they said, how can you do this? I mean, that's on one side. I mean, we have always been doing that, right? I mean, the fashion industry. Secondly, you're also kind of, relearning the whole concept of customer is looking for a hut, whereas I'm trying to sell a Taj Mahal. Because I have Taj Mahal, I'm trying to sell Taj Mahal. Whereas customer is looking only for a hut or a 2 BHK, actually, an apartment. So that's another learning, right? What customer needs is what we need to give it. So that learning has come really thick and fast. Thank you, Swami, for that. And now if I can ask actually to throw some light on, on the similar kind of, environment, similar kind of challenges from Atul. Atul, if you can actually help us understand what did you have to go through?
Yeah, as Swami sir has already given a prerogative on how the things have changed from fashion industry. I being from Signify, which is formerly known as Philips Lighting, I would like to bring some additional insights from how it changed for the electronics industry. So for electronics industry, in the end of 2019 or beginning of 2020, specifically for India market, it was a supply shock initially, and then it followed by a demand shock. So supply shock is basically because electronics industry is heavily dependent on for specifically for semiconductors. We have a lot of dependency from outside India, and we had seen huge disruption in supplies for Q1 of 2020, and then followed with a disruption in the market in terms of demand. So I think for us it was a double whammy. I mean, we had challenges from component perspective also, at the same time challenges from the demand side also. So and I think this was a different kind of pandemic, and I think for all of us, this is a different learning altogether. So what we did is basically, obviously, the most important aspect in supply chain, obviously, and that reached to a highest level in this pandemic era is agility, bringing more and more agility in your supply chain. Because we have seen huge changes in demand after June 2020. We have seen the demand patterns have changed. Many people have migrated from cities to the tier 2, tier 3 cities. People have started working from home. So there are a lot of demand which from office lighting, which has gone into home lighting. Our office segment got stuck up for almost a year. We didn't have much of a business, but at the same time, home business have grown multifolds, and we were not planned for it, right? I mean, obviously, no historical data, no statistical model was suggesting any such kind of rush pre-pandemic. So obviously, it was a big challenge, and we had this trouble. But obviously, when you have an intention to mitigate, you have ways also to find out. So what we did is that we have also reduced our demand horizon. We have reduced from 3 months to 1 month, and even we have brought this agility to an extent wherein our production cycle, instead of giving monthly plan, we started on a weekly plan, and that helped us a lot in bringing the demand supply gap to a great extent. Also, from demand perspective, we used to just look at state-wise data earlier on state-wise, what is the sales plan, what is the trend and all. But now this pandemic taught us to go a bit more micro. So we actually started looking at it, doing data analytics of 741 districts, their patterns, and started deploying our materials accordingly. So I think bringing up that agility, bringing up that flexibility is the key, and I'm sure every organization would have done that. And I think that's the only mantra to be successful in such pandemic scenario. No forecasting model, no statistical model can work in such kind of scenario. So it's more of using your emotional intelligence and agility. That is what I feel.
Great. Thank you, Atul. I think wonderful, actually, that we get another perspective from, let's say, the lighting retailer, lighting manufacturer, actually, side of things. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, we built our actually residence currently in Bangalore about 4 or 5 years ago. And this is the first time that we realized that the lights are not in the strategically right spots, because you never actually, plan for these things, right? Even in my study, even now I'm feeling that there isn't enough lighting actually on my, sitting position or whatever, right? So you'll always go and try to get some lighting and so on. And you're absolutely right. So we've been like, going around the place to shopping for a stand, it's a light stand or actually some focus light or whatever it is, all those things. And also Philips being actually the world leader in the lighting, I guess, that comes as a name, in fact, to the customer minds, to start with. That's also a great thing. Second thing, I think what you mentioned was about inventory, whether it is local or statewide inventory versus, nationwide inventory. I think that is one big lesson all of us have learned, to have a single bucket of inventory so that we are able to deploy the inventory at the most needed or the most demanding place, in fact. That's probably the single largest, I guess, learning we all have actually done in the last probably 12 to 18 months. Thank you for both, for bringing that perspective. Now, let me move on to the second question for the same thing within the integrated business planning. Now, I'll ask again, Atul, I'll continue to ask you the same question. What are your supply chain challenges post-pandemic, given the fact that all your previous models, previous historic models, previous forecasting models are plans and supply demand flows? Because you also have a very unique kind of proposition, with your suppliers all the way to your retailers and so on. That was thrown into complete chaos, right, due to lockdown. How did you manage your operation, distribution, capacities, suppliers, and manpower post-pandemic?
Yeah, so I think, Anil, I'll just continue from where I left in the first discussion. So definitely this has posed a lot of supply challenges for the company. And I would say, in a way, thanks to this pandemic, the digitization efforts that every company was taking, that has gone exponentially higher because of pandemic. I mean, whatever the automation plans that we have actually fast-tracked those and implemented those to ensure that we will have seamless supply chain. Specifically from integrated business planning perspective, we have created a single platform to see the demand between us, our vendor, our distributors. We had a single platform wherein we created the platform wherein they could see the demand, they could see what is the supply status, and take actions accordingly. I mean, in the traditional world or traditional supply chain, we see that first distributor will inform to the company will inform to the supplier. But now with integrated business planning is being put in place in Signify, what we are seeing is that the minute we see some changes from end customers, that information immediately flows down to the vendors. And that seamless flow of information, that automation, which would have taken 2-3 years, I think that has cut down drastically. And that is being kind of a landmark situation which is happening today. I'm sure many of these companies would have gone for automation, be it because of use of internet. Obviously, the e-commerce business is growing because the kind of the new things which are coming in, like 3D printing or machine learning, your ways of changing the producing or manufacturing the things have changed. So that has brought a big change. So the biggest takeaway which I see, Anil, the kind of push to automation, push to industrial automation because of this pandemic has grown multifold. And that is actually helping us in mitigating our supply challenges as well as managing our inventories to a respectable level. And also this automation is finally at the end of the day, it will definitely bring a lot of customer satisfaction, which I think not only for lighting industry or not only for fashion industry, I'm sure it will be for each and every industry. Every industry is trying to see how we can use artificial intelligence or machine learning to its fullest and mitigate such risk, because this pandemic has taught us that such things can happen and we have to be prepared for that. As Mr. Swami said, there could have been, I mean, obviously we all don't want it, but still, if at all any such wave comes again, I think we are almost getting better prepared for it through our industrial automation and integrated planning. So which is from vendor till customer. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, it's wonderful. I think, the way you guys have been able to manage it and then bring automation. And then also what was interesting for me was actually the seamless, actually the process flow or seamless impact transactions between all the way from your suppliers to your dealer network and so on. So I think that is what speaks actually very high about the current value chain importance or importance of the current value chain, in fact, or the transparency, what we as a supply chain community have been able to build. So obviously the digitization of the supply chain and automation has definitely helped us. For example, you touched upon on the e-commerce setup as well. I mean, I remember last July, May, June, July itself, not even, the lockdown had been lifted and all that, we could see a huge pent-up demand actually from the apparel customers saying that kids will not stop growing. So whether it is lockdown or not, we need kids clothes, because kids actually, you need the clothes for every month, every second month actually. So we had almost like 6 to 8 to 10x sometimes actually, most of the apparel, players, whether we had an e-commerce platform or not, customers were demanding deliveries in fact. Fortunately, quite a few of us were already had started, on the omni journey. That's how we were able to meet some of that. But you're right, with the automation only, we were able to, kind of build the multiple access and so on. So Atul, thank you so much for actually bringing, a perspective on that. Now, let me ask Shom on the same question. In fact, how did Shom and his industry manage post-pandemic all these, supply chain key, areas of focus? Shom?
Thanks, Anil. Am I audible? Yeah. So, I come from a retail background, and we are again a kids and apparels, both men's, women's, as well as home retailer in Australia and New Zealand. So our challenges were many. To start with, we faced the biggest challenge of stock, right, which a lot of us faced as well. So we had lack of visibility of stock. It was very difficult to understand the change in demand, as Mr. Swami was saying, that the demand was so sporadic. It was very difficult to understand what is going to happen next versus what's the stock flow that's going to happen. Versus the impact of transportation, because there were a lot of lockdown restrictions that were happening across the globe. So visibility of stock was the biggest challenge that we faced, followed by the supply chain processes, which were not too much responsive to this change in the entire scenarios. It was not flexible or agile enough, as Mr. Atul was saying. That was some of the challenges that we had also faced. And last but not the least, the slow decision-making loops, right? As everything needed to be reconciled on the system. So the systems that we had, which were integrated with each other, are they good enough to actually soak in this much amount of changes that is happening in the industry? That was one of the challenges that we had also faced, right? So if you think about it, it was majorly around change in demand, supply chain constraints, and operational challenges. If I talk about how we kind of mitigated that, it was around something called digital supply chain optimization, right? So we took a 4-step approach, and again, another way of looking at the integrated business planning approach. So we first looked into how do we optimize the decision making through data analytics, right? And this was required to ensure that we cater to the ever-changing demand. As Mr. Swami was saying, that we cut down from long forecasts to short forecasts, right? And then we also wanted to ensure that we use data to influence our buying and quantification decisions. And we ensured that we built some AI-enabled decision-making tools with also simulation mechanisms in, right? So for example, if one state is going to lockdown versus another state which is probably not going to lockdown, what is the implications in a supply chain environment versus another state which is going for a weekend lockdown, let's say. So there are various implications from a simulation standpoint, from a demand forecasting standpoint, and in that way. Second, what we looked into was the visibility of inventory and production. So as much as it is important to understand what is going to happen in the future, it is also important that we deploy the right tools to know what is happening currently, right? So we provided a stock visibility kind of a solution with continuous visibility of the stock flow. For example, let's say if required, we had to fly in stocks if the road transport or the ship or the water transport was not working at certain points in time, or we probably went to local suppliers than global suppliers if the global suppliers were not working because of the pandemic situation. So disruptive and rapid measures needed to be taken in certain situations. The third one was around supply chain responsiveness. So an agile and transparent supply chain which caters to deferred decision making and quick response, right? So we truly took the advantage of a global supply chain framework. It helps in mitigating the risk of localized restrictions or lockdowns, but one of the disadvantage of that is also an increase in lead time. But again, with a lot of portfolio of products spread across the supply chain, that can be taken into consideration as well.
Great.
And the last one would be standardization of processes, right? So building cost-effective models and smart operating models, which is flexible and agile. So we already have seen a lot of positive impact on lost sales reductions as well as lead time improvement.
Right. Thanks, Shom. Thanks actually for bringing that perspective as well. When you spoke about, Australia and New Zealand, I don't even want to just think, because I'm half Australian actually. And then, I very closely follow what's happening there. They are in a different world altogether. Today, as you probably know, Australia Post, which is one of the largest logistics service providers there, they have stopped accepting all parcel services because of the pandemic. And that country is in chaos right now. Both, the big cities are in lockdown and all that. So that's probably, a topic for us to talk separately, in fact. Now, very, very interestingly, you brought some of the, supply chain, actually the digitization and all that into the perspective, right? I think that is what is probably going to be most interesting actually for probably this, coming probably months and years, in fact. Automation, and then also in terms of actually, how do you bring technological solutions, which is where I think NASSCOM COE team has been doing a wonderful job of trying to bring in or bridge, both industry along with the service providers are actually some of the entrepreneurs and so on. And, they are trying to not only, give them an opportunity to solve the problems, at the same time offering industry some of the, solution, making teams and so on. So thanks for bringing that, perspective actually. Let me quickly move on to the second part of the, the discussion, which is on the supply chain intelligence side of things. Let me go straight with the question. How did your existing supply chain intelligence, this question would be answered by Balakrishnan. How did your existing supply chain intelligence help you to stay connected with your customers? What are the tools and dashboards, etc. did you use to keep on top of the situation of supply and demand efficiencies? Bala, over to you.
Thanks, Anil. Good afternoon to everyone. So before I answer that question, quick context. I work for Lowe's. Essentially, it is one of the largest home improvement retailer in Americas. As an essential retailer, one of the things which we had always built as part of a muscle memory is we had a command center always to deal with hurricanes and floods and fires, which is very prevalent in that part of the world, right? As part of that, we already had built mechanism to know that how do we manage emergency transportation? How do we identify emergency products, right? How do we deal with store closures, right? So we kind of extended that kind of muscle memory into a pandemic kind of situation. So that really helped us in the last year and a half. So that is one example. The second thing which I would like to highlight is how we kind of usefully employed our sourcing engine. We already were in a transformative journey to kind of ensure that our inventory visibility not only extends to our warehouses, but also to the suppliers' manufacturing facilities, to their own supply chain. So that integration was an ongoing effort, right? One of the interesting things which happened during the last year and a half was, as a home improvement retailer, the demand for things like refrigerators, washers, dryers, that really skyrocketed, right? One of the things we did was kind of fine-tune our algorithm to, as your transport trucks are moving between your distribution centers and your supplier manufacturers, can we capture that signal and kind of give a reasonably good prediction of when customers can expect their products, right? So that was a very good example of how we used our current digital infrastructure to kind of manage the demand. The third example I would state was, as this pandemic happened, US market especially was going through a significant housing demand and boom, in fact.
Right.
Lumber prices, for example, increased 5 times in a matter of a year. Even worse, they came down in a matter of 3 months to 3 to 4 times, right? Obviously, all of that cannot be directly passed on to the customer, right? So
Yes.
along with our merchandising teams, how do we kind of manage this as a portfolio, not just directly, oh, okay, this variety of lumber increased 5 times, okay, just pass it on to the customer, right? Instead of that, how do we manage this as a portfolio, but still kind of manage our margins and don't end up in a situation which is completely unacceptable to the business, right? While still making it favorable for the customer. So these are 2 or 3 examples I could share how we managed with our current infrastructure.
Great, great. Thanks, Bala. I mean, I think you again bring another perspective, right? I mean, this was one of the biggest learnings that we as practitioners actually understood after last, the first wave of pandemic, which was all of a sudden white goods started, shooting up, particularly the fridge and the washing machine, because people hadn't thought of storing so many things in the fridge. People actually hadn't had the need to wash clothes so often, in fact. And also, anyway, husbands were at home, working from home. So what work, what else actually can they do? Multitasking, right? So obviously they ended up actually doing all the washing and so on. So great stuff actually. If I can move to Swami now once again. Swami, if you can actually, just tell us what tools did you use or what came in handy for you to manage the situation, Swami?
One of the biggest changes, Anil, has been we normally used to plan for optimizing resources, optimize factories, optimize warehouse capacities, optimize, utilizations. A lot of optimization used to be more of resources optimization. One of the biggest change which we have gone through is we have now, one of the biggest change is we have learned time is more precious than any of these. We learn to collapse time, if I can say so. The industry which works in a mind to market time of anywhere between 8 to 9 months is something which is not sustainable in the near future, or probably not just sustainable. The best practice would be to collapse this. So what we have learned is to collapse this time dramatically. What used to be 6 to 8 months was at times even 60 days. And then, because of we were again responding to what is happening, what is the need. So in short, planning process needs to now have one of the biggest measures is to reduce the mind to market time, collapse time. So the overall lead time reduction is one of the key parameters for improvement. This was probably achieved by us because we had implemented a digital platform. Digitalization was extremely critical to be able to even do this.
Yes.
So, I remember early in my career, we used to have meetings where we didn't even agree on what was the plan.
Wow.
There used to be days where, we used to everybody has a different version of the plan.
Yes.
So the single version of truth was no longer a challenge. The digitization. So we were able to do all this plan, not even going to office, because we were digitized.
Yeah.
And we were all working on the same platform. What was my plan was visible to all the functions immediately.
Correct.
All of this was transparently visible across, because in my opinion, deploying a platform for digital planning, digitized planning, SNOP process is extremely critical for the industry.
Very true.
The second one, what I would say is the digitization also enabled us to game the plan. There are times when we are optimizing for cash. There are times we are optimizing for sales. There's times you're optimizing for profit. So the gaming of all this was possible because you have an end-to-end process, end-to-end tool. Otherwise, you probably would have gone by your gut and taken a decision, probably. And maybe you will be right 50% of the time, but the chances of you being right dramatically increase the moment you're able to do multiple scenarios and being able to do that. Again, in my opinion, platforms play a critical role in this process as well. And then I would say other important learning for me has been important other tools which I will talk of is one is the master data management process in the organization. The channels changed dramatically.
Yes.
Channel of sales changed dramatically. The e-commerce zoomed to 3 times, 4 times, and the physical channels, physical retail dropped down. And the demands of each e-commerce is pretty different. You need to have digitized data. You need digitization of digitized data was extremely critical. Digitized master data availability was extremely critical to being able to even respond immediately to demand in these channels. So one of the biggest tech tools which we need as an organization is to be able to digitize the master data, a catalog of the products being available, merchandise being available is extremely critical to being able to even respond. Otherwise, you have to shoot, you have to get data, you have to put it together. People are in different locations. So absolutely, it would have been impossible for us to do that. The third one I would say is the third tool I would say is the sensing demand. What is likely to sell? How much of this product is likely to sell? Here is where artificial intelligence is playing a key role and has played a key role in our organization as well. To sense which product would sell how much. This would have been my joke for most of the time. 50% of the time, what we planned would have been wrong. Well, we expected something to be a bestseller. 50% of the time, we were right. We expected something not to sell. Again, 50% of the time, only we were right. So the sensing of data is extremely critical, and this would find many other industries would find it very funny, but in this industry, because of the sheer variety, it's humanly impossible to be able to predict demand to that level of accuracy. And the best of the buying teams, best of the teams are able to get around 50 to 55% of accuracy.
Correct.
That is the other challenge. So AI played an important tool for us in sensing demand, so that we could get products which and we could get in the right depth as well, the right amount of the right quantity as well, to be able to not being saddled with excess inventory later.
Yeah.
So I would say, in short, these are the three tools: platforms,
Great.
the master data management process tools, and the AI sensing are the tools which helped us to manage this better.
Great. Thanks, Somi. Actually, I think that was wonderfully put, I think. So some of those important tools, I think. So if I can quickly go back to Shom and then ask him about what is that one magical solution that would have actually helped you or would help you actually, Shom, if I can quickly ask you that question.
Sure, Anil. So I think some of the artificial intelligence enabled demand and inventory planning mechanism, right? So where demand planning and inventory planning are going hand in hand. So that should be one. We already have deployed robots in our store which keep stock, right? So the inventory planning and controlling has become pretty easy. At the same time, if I have to pick like one game-changing solution, then I think we should have something which can couple today's realities and operational challenges with tomorrow's vision. And it should have something which also has a platform for collaboration across various parties like retailers, suppliers, factories, and all of that. So I think something like a supply chain control tower or a supply chain intelligence hub.
Yes.
Imagine a system which enables you to have real-time visibility across your order management, stocks that are being manufactured right now, stocks that are in transit, stocks that are in stores and your distribution centers. And in addition, it also provides you with the future visibility around demand shifts in a just-in-time environment, right? What we are seeing right now, this can lead to a transformational opportunity in supply chain. And I think it can be a true intelligence hub for supply chain.
Great. Thanks, Shom. Once again, I think that's a wonderful suggestion. I think it's a good magical solution. If I can quickly ask Bala on the same question, what is that one magical solution that you would look at it, Bala?
Yeah, I wish truly there was one silver bullet, but if I had to pick one, and I think this was touched upon by many of the panelists, I will pick on visibility tools. Right? I know it's a broad umbrella supported by significant amount of processes and technologies, but how do we get visibility, whether it is my first mile, middle mile, last mile? How do I get visibility across inventories, whether it is with the suppliers or within our DCs, or it is in transit, or even for that matter, as the flow patterns change across the entire supply chain, what is the impact of labor, right? All of this, if there is a silver bullet, I would say if we have visibility and if we provide the right data, accurate data, real-time data to the decision makers, that will make a significant difference.
Great.
If I had to call out the second thing, I know AI, ML, natural language processing, all of that are great buzzwords which gets thrown, right? And being a supply chain technologist, one of the key things I get asked as part of implementation of all of this is, can you have explainability of all these solutions, right?
Yes.
I think as a technologist, that's the biggest question I keep hearing. And that's one of the things we keep working and improving. And that's a journey in progress, right? So these are one of the two things I would highlight.
Thanks, Bala. I think, I was actually suggesting to even COE team also earlier that, asking the, 25-year-old professionals actually, to kind of, finish up the supply chain planning and then intelligence actually within 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. It was going to be a big challenge actually. Hope you have done some justice actually in bringing some of the issues onto the forefront and give you a flavor of actually what is happening in the integrated business planning as well as on the supply chain intelligence, side of things. So thank you very much for the opportunity once again. Thanks all the panelists, in fact, from the bottom of my heart. I think you've been wonderful, panel speakers, in fact. Thank you, NASSCOM COE team once again. I'll hand this back to the COE team again. Thank you.
Thank you, Anil.
Thank you.
Very much, Dr. Anil, for the brilliant panel discussion.